Hello everyone, welcome to Superweapons of War. Today's episode will be on the B-29 Superfortress, a project so expensive, but so worth it. The beginnings. In the beginning stages of the war, the USAAC, the United States Army Air Corps, knew that the old B-17 bombers from a past era were no good in long-range bombardments, such as the Japanese home islands, a whopping 8,000 miles from Hawaii to Tokyo and back. The B-17 in comparison could only fly 3,000 miles with no payload. The USAAC wanted a design for a bomber that could reach the home islands and end the war quickly, if need be. The proposition. The USAAC put out a contract for a long-range bomber capable of taking out the Japanese home islands. Boeing and their XB-29 fought against Consolidated's B-32, Lockheed's XB-30, and Douglas's XB-31. Douglas and Lockheed abandoned the projects and left the others to fight. Boeing got 2 prototype orders in August of 1940 and a third aircraft added later in December. The first prototype flew on September 21, 1942, coming armed with pressurized cabins and a stepless cockpit, one of the only planes in the war to have this, similar to the HE-111, the infamous German bomber. The second prototype flew on December 30th of 1942, this time armed with the Sperry anti-aircraft remote control system, but suffered an engine failure and crashed in February of the next year, killing all 11 crewmen on board. The B-29. The B-29 was a revolutionary aircraft, but an expensive project to uphold, costing a mind-blowing $3 billion, $43 billion in today's money. It came with 10 50 caliber M2AN Browning anti-aircraft weapons and an optional 2 50 cals and a 20mm M2 cannon in the rear, although this was removed. It also had completely pressurized cabins, removing the need of air tanks and oxygen tubes, along with being heated and cooled. It finally came with remote control turrets operated from one of the many cabins inside. They could be controlled by multiple crewmen or a single one, allowing for plenty of controlled fire to get rid of enemy aircraft. Service life. The B-29 was used for attacks on the home islands in 1944 and 1945, doing consistent bombing raids and almost impenetrable to the enemy AA. They also served bombing Berlin in the ending days of the European War. Their most famous act, however, was the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki in 1945, dropping the only nuclear weaponry ever to be used in combat. They served well into the Korean War, replaced by the Convair B-36 and renamed as a medium bomber. They were refitted in the 1950s to B-50 Superfortresses and later the experimental B-54 Superfortress. They were retired from service in 1964. The British Air Force did use a few of them as a stopgap to wait on jet bombers coming in, and 2 were handed down to the Australian Air Force, only to be retired and scrapped in 1957. The Soviet Air Force, in the meantime, developed their own copy of the B-29, the Tupolev Tu-4, but that's a story for another time. I hope you all loved this episode of Superweapons of War. A very interesting story and an even more interesting life of the B-29 Superfortress, a plane that in some way won the war for the United States.